expectations that content like this, which by the way, if you look here, this is really good content from like, government organizations or Investopedia. But when you do your usual 5 best ways, cheap top ways to whatever, even though it might be really good content, sometimes that's not the way that users want us to frame content anymore, because again, they're very skeptical about this kind of stuff. Google knows this. Google's been ahead of the curve in this for a long, long time. And by the way, what they'll do is, and I know we talk about search features like answer boxes and direct answers, which is the same thing, and feature snippets and blah, blah, blah. But to me, the SERP is dominated by filters, and no one's talking about this. But if you put in whatever query, you'll see so many variations of some kind of filtering systems, because Google understands that while you might put in a top-level query because we're used to searching that way, the user really does want very specific information because, again, they're skeptical. So Google will journey them or segment them or push them down the funnel towards that very specific content through all sorts of filters. In other words, the skeptical user doesn't want to have a very narrow understanding of whatever it is they're looking for. They really want to be able to see the whole vista. What I mean is, if you have a skeptical user, the only way to make them feel autonomous, by the way, there was an article in The Atlantic that came out about this a day or two ago, which actually talked about this a little bit. If you have a skeptical user and they need to feel autonomous, the only way to make them feel autonomous, like they're in control of their experience, they have a say in this, they understand, right, is by offering up all of the topics or subtopics related to the query, and then allowing them, giving them entry points into those subtopics. So if you're talking about going on a hike, which we're going to be talking about later, you'll see, Google needs to be able to give them all of those subtopics around going on a hike and then let the user choose, because a skeptical user needs to feel autonomous and they need to feel like they have an understanding of, I can make an educated choice of where I want to go here. To solve this pain point, which is an enormous pain point across the web, Google needs MUM, which is why Google is very much energetic about MUM. But I thought MUM is all about, you said Google Lens and taking pictures of stuff and combining that with text and all sorts of shiny, really cool things. But fundamentally, MUM is really about it being 1,000 times more powerful than Google's previous top machine learning property, BERT. What does it mean? Whoops. What does it mean? That MUM is 1,000 times more powerful than BERT? I have no idea. No one has any idea. But it just means that it's really, really freaking powerful because BERT was really freaking powerful. In specific, right, and this is, by the way, is the most important thing that I've ever heard or has been written about MUM, and I'm stalling because I need to see the GIF. There we go. Google talked about a query around hiking Mount Adams. I've hiked Mount Adams. Now I want to hike Mount Fuji. What do I need to do differently to prepare? That was a query that Google used as a sample to showcase MUM. And on that, Google said, take the question about hiking Mount Fuji. MUM could understand you're comparing two mountains, so elevation and trail information may be relevant. It could also understand in the context of hiking. Now check this out. To prepare could include things like fitness training as well as finding the right gear. In other words, Google's using MUM, or will be using MUM, to parse out phrases. In this case, to prepare in the context of hiking could either mean information about fitness and training or information about equipment for hiking. You're like, really? That's the most important thing anyone's ever said about MUM? And the answer is yeah, because that's the part of MUM that solves the user's need for more control, more autonomy in the SERP, and more specific information. In other words, if Google's able to parse out prepare, so in the case here of the hike, Google's able to parse the word prepare to mean fitness and diet and all sorts of information around that for hiking, and information around equipment for hiking, that lets the user see everything they need to know topically around hiking. If Google, which naturally they will, provides entry points, clear demarcated entry points on the SERP in order to either explore fitness and training around hiking or equipment around hiking, that gives you access to the specific information that a skeptical user wants. So MUM gives the user autonomy and it gives the user specific substance, both of which address the skeptical user base that is the web. Let me put it a little bit differently. What's Google doing here? Let's just ask this straight up. Well, what Google's doing here is giving the user a 360-degree view of a topic, in this case in hiking, all the things around preparing for a hike. And something just blocked me from sharing there we go. And you need to care. You need to care that this is what Google's doing. And now why should you care, right? Finally, we're getting to the actionable points. And no, we'll get there, I promise. you need to understand what Google's doing, why Google's doing this, because this is how machine learning works. Okay, machine learning works. And by the way, this is what I mean, you can't optimize for machine learning. What you really can do is align to machine learning. And if you need to align with machine learning, you need to understand what it's doing and why it's doing it, which is why we just covered that. Hey, perfect presentation, right? I hope. What machine learning does, and the way you align with machine learning, is through profiles, because machine learning creates profiles. And you're like, what's a profile? Well, Google's been talking about this for a long time. In 2019, John Mueller was talking about how does Google know good content from bad content? And what he said was, well, for a particular vertical, let's just for argument's sake, say heart attack prevention. What Google will do is they'll go to the super authorities, so WebMD, Harvard Health, the Mayo Clinic, and they'll say, okay, around heart attack prevention, this is what content looks and sounds like. They create a profile. I mean, machine learning takes it an input, creates a profile based on that input, and then goes out and says, hey, let's take the profile we created around heart attack prevention and apply it to your site. Does your site look and sound like and feel like and discuss heart attack prevention the way that our profile says that it should? If it does, great. If it doesn't, we're not going to rank you. Obviously, oversimplifying all of that. So with Mom, you have a new way of profiling. Again, you have a way of profiling based on really staunch topical parsing. And you need to understand that if you're going to, quote unquote, optimize for Mom, or better word is align with Mom. So then how do you do this, right? Finally, right? And the answer is predictive need. You need to predict the needs of your users. And you're like, come on, everyone knows that. Everyone's been talking about predicting your needs of a user since the 1960s, unless you're an SEO, in which case I'm telling you something probably new, which is a little bit concerning. But for many SEOs, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, we think of keyword research and talking about user needs a little bit differently. What I mean by predictive need, by the way, is a few things. Fundamentally, it's understanding that when your users get to your page, and again, we're talking about this is how you align with Mom's topical parsing, meaning Mom's machine learning profile. When your users get to your page, they will have problems. Will they have problems like I have problems with my mom? No, they won't have problems that are that bad. By the way, not my dad with my mom, hence the problems with my mom. TMI. What the problems they will have are they will have gaps. They won't fully understand or may not fully understand or appreciate your content. So you're offering information and you need to help the user make the best use of that information or understand that information the best way. By the way, really quick, links are a great way to do that if they don't necessarily understand something. So link out to a resource that helps them. They also need to know what else they need to know. Right? Where they need to go next. In fact, the user might have a very subtle sense they need more information after reading your content or after visiting your page, but they may not even fully appreciate the fact that they do need more information now. So you need to predict, and you might even need to predict when you tell them, hey, you need more information now. This, by the way, is a keyword research of the future. I would say current, which means that if you want to align with Mom, and we're going to get into the specifics around doing that in a second, you might want to take a step away from your keyword research tool, which doesn't mean there aren't tools out there, right? SEMrush has a topic research tool, which again, parses out topics the way that Mom might parse out topics. Also Ask is a great tool that parses out the people also ask feature and gives you a topical look at what people are searching for. There are ways to get topical understanding. What I'm saying is topical understanding, which we've been talking a little bit about on SEO for a while, becomes way more important when dealing with Mom, which is parsing out topics. So let's take a real case so you can better understand this. Let's say go to Yankees game, and let's parse out go to the way Mom might parse out go to. Now, the way that Google understands go to Yankees game right now, obviously I'm a massive Yankees fan, is why I keep using the Yankees, but the way that Google understands going to a baseball game right now is very linear. A bunch of ads where you get tickets to go to a Yankees game, a bunch of results, dominated results around going to a Yankee game to buy tickets. You know, that's the idea of go to. Lately, there's been a little bit more of holistic results, maybe one or two spattered in there, giving you a little bit of a broader sense of what it might mean to go to a game. So, for example, Major League Baseball has a result that ranks now, know before you go, pregame checklist, which, by the way, is a really thin list of some really not really helpful things about where gates are located so you can get in and what time these gates, open up so you can actually get into the game. Not very holistic. So what does go to actually mean in the context of Yankee game? How might Mom parse this? Well, all right. It might mean how far is the train from the stadium? Can I bring my own food? Who wants to pay $20 for a hot dog? I'll bring one in my backpack. That's not weird. Is it safe at night? Will I get my butt kicked for wearing the other team's jersey? If you follow sports, someone got knocked out cold the other week at Madison Square Garden for doing that. Is the other team any good? How long does it take to get out of the parking lot? No one wants to sit in a parking lot for an hour getting out of a game. Are the seats comfortable? Do they serve craft beer, or am I stuck drinking Miller Lite? Will my kids hear a lot of swear words? Maybe don't sit in the bleachers. This is what it means to parse out a topic. How did I do that? What kind of sorcery is this? What keyword research tool did I use? I didn't. I had topical familiarity, which again, why I show this example, because it was just easy to show. And I was able to empathize with my audience. I know what it means to go to a game. What might somebody who hasn't been to a game, what might they need to know? And that can change, by the way, in the type of audience. If you're a tourist from another country, that means something totally different than someone who lives in the neighborhood, right? Put it this way. What I just did here with parsing out all these things around going to a game is the SEO equivalent of a wheel alignment. You are aligning to mom. You may not be asking the exact questions that mom will be asking when it parses out a topic, but at a minimum, what you're showing Google is, we understand that this topic has subtopics and has layers of information that need to be flushed out and parsed out, just like you with mom understand that a topic has multiple layers that need to be parsed out and clearly shown to a user. If you don't believe me that this is what Google does and how it works, again, this is what Google has been talking about for a long time already. So don't take my word for it. Take Barry's word for it from SEO Roundtable back in 2019. So with mom, what it means to be, I hate to use this catchphrase, topically authoritative is going to look very different because, again, new machine learning property, new profile. So what it means to be authoritative, or what it means to comprehensively cover a topic or be relevant for a topic, means this really extreme level of parsing, which is, again, what Google was showing you with that query around going for a hike. Does it mean to prepare? Does it mean the equipment? Does it mean fitness? Does it mean diet? And so forth. Google is going to be giving the user a 360-degree view of a topic because they have a greater ability to parse it out through mom. And you need to do the same thing on your own site in order to align with that. If you don't care about anything I just said, and you're aligning with machine learning properties, blah, 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 whatever, at a minimum, if Google's going to be parsing out topics, let's go with the preparing for a hike again. If Google's going to be parsing out fitness and diet and training versus, another topic around equipment around going for a hike, preparing for a hike, it is going to be having clear, distinct entry points into those subtopics, because what's the point of parsing it if you don't have clear entry points? That if your site only deals with, let's say, the fitness part of the preparing for a hike and not the equipment, if Google's showing those entry points to multiple subtopics, guess what? You only have the ability to show up within one entry point on the SERP, not multiple entry points. So at a minimum, if you're not parsing out your content really, really well, when Google does release the beast, does release mom onto the SERP, you're going to be limiting the places where you're able to rank to a large degree. Now, is this scary and doing SEO in a whole new way and thinking about parsing in a whole new way, and it kind of makes the idea of a topic cluster a little bit more complicated than it was before? Is that scary? Yes, but it's important to put things into context. Is it as scary as sitting around and watching Dr. Phil every day on daytime TV sitting in a nursing home? No, it's not as scary as that, right? So keep it in context. And with that, thank you so much. I hope you learned something from it. And let me know if you have any questions. I'm on Twitter at Morty Oberstein.
Thank you very much, Morty. That was a great presentation. I think we were watching here behind the scenes with Claudia, and I think we only have time for a couple of questions, but I think we might need to save some time for some more later. So you want to go ahead?
Yeah, Morty, you mentioned that you were a teacher a long time ago, but you haven't lost a step, because I would definitely sign up for your class, the GIFs, the memes, even the Yankee reference as a fellow New Yorker. So I really appreciated that. So the first question is, and this is really close to my heart as a news publisher, Google was still ignoring title tags and rewriting them on the SERP at least 62% of the time. How would you say we can work to actually avoid this?
Well, I don't know if you avoided it. So I did a whole presentation about this a while ago. I've pulled a ton of SEMrush data on this. What I think Google is doing, by the way, is saying, hey, look, in order for us to understand content, let's put it back into teaching again. When I had my students and said, hey, I want to show if you understand something. I wouldn't just ask them to spit it back. I would ask them to apply it to another scenario. What I think Google's doing is, to a large extent with the rewrites, is saying, hey, not only can we understand content and rank it well, we can understand content so well that we can rewrite it. And by the way, they're relying less and less and less on the H1 as time goes on. So initially they used the H1 around 70% of the time. It went to 65% in October 22. And then in January 22, that one dropped down to 55%. So the only thing I can say to you is, like, there's probably not much you can do other than giving Google the right clues to understand what your content is about, giving them the right structure. They might be able to pull some ideas from making sure, like, okay, if you have a page about this is how we'll frame it on the SERP, because I think Google wants to rewrite for the sake of rewriting.
So try to be as informative as possible to really kind of guide them in the right direction, at least from a title tag perspective.
Yeah, and then reverse, if you see something you don't like and you can take a look, I would reverse engineer it. Like if you see they're pulling from the H2s and like, that's not good, so maybe change your H2s, right? The problem is if they're relying less and less on that structure, then what do? That's a really good question.
Okay. Well, kind of as a small segue there, you mentioned clues and you mentioned kind of structuring those clues and that information. Do you think structured data will play a role in MUM? Will it help? Will we have new tools to kind of help us structure that information a bit better for Google, or is it a much broader topic?
It's a really good question. I think it's a much broader thing, because I think Google's looking at your content very much broadly and holistically to really try to understand the content via understanding the context and the content. So structured data helps, but I think it really goes beyond what structured data is, at least the way it's being used, what it's really able to do for Google.
Okay. Okay, perfect.
So
thank you.
We wanted to thank you, Morty. This was a great talk. Like I said, whenever you have your next class, please make sure to send me the link so I could actually sign up for it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Morty. Take care. And for everybody watching at home, at the office, on the couch, on the desk, we'll be right back. Have a brief pause, and we'll continue with more talks.
Everyone, we want to let you know that every year at our events, we give you some presents. So sharing the hashtag SEOday on social media, you are participating to win a free iPad. There will be 2 winners. Stay tuned until the end of the event, and good luck to everyone. Sandy and Claudia, all yours again.
Thank you so much, Tef. What a beginning to this event, huh, Santi? Yeah. So to go on with the event, we're actually going to present Montserrat Cano, who actually met at a panel 2 months ago where we were in Madrid, Spain, and it was a great time. Always wanted to meet her. We always had a lot of interaction on social media and on LinkedIn. Montserrat is an international SEO and digital marketing consultant. She is also the judge of the European and UK Search and Global Content Awards.
And today she's going to be talking about a topic that some of us really enjoy, some of us maybe enjoy a little bit less, but I think none of us can really deny the power and the importance for project management in order to make the most out of your SEO work. So we want to give a warm welcome to Montserrat. Can you hear us? Are you over there?
Hello.
Hi, how are you? Welcome.
I'm good.
Glad to have you.
Thank you very much for having me today. How are you?
Absolutely.
How are you guys?
Very well, very well. Where it's a little bit chilly where we are right now. Yes. How's the weather over there?
Oh, right now it's more like spring. Heat wave is over.
Very jealous.
Yes, no,
very
Claudia
jealous.
and I are definitely very jealous. So yeah, Montserrat, the virtual stage is yours. We're all ears.
Right, perfect. Let me just share my screen. All right. Let me know if you can see anything.
Yes.
Yep.
Perfect.
All right, perfect. All right. So, thank you very much for having me on today, and thank you everyone who's attending my talk today, this morning, this afternoon, wherever it is that you are based. I am going to be talking to you about one way for you to take away some of the anxiety that we all feel whenever we are facing a project, and so that you can make the most of your SEO work, so that it all fits well within your daily life, daily working lives, right? First of all, I would like you to think about one of those occasions when you have faced a project and you thought, oh my God, I am not going to be able to make it. I'm not going to be able to deliver this project. I would like you to think about that and keep it on the back of your mind throughout this presentation so that you can revisit it later and maybe think about how would you be able to have fixed the situation if it was if it didn't go right, or how you are able to fix any similar situation in the future. Because sometimes what happens is that in those situations, we tend to kind of see our skill set in a bad light, in a negative light, and it's not like we are unable to deliver the project, but maybe our own circumstances, your working circumstances, or your maybe life circumstances make you feel uncertain and insecure. And maybe it could be because I don't know, somebody from the board has stepped out of it and just started to take an interest in your small website project or audits. Sometimes you know this is not exactly the case. Any website audit, particularly an enterprise audit, is actually quite big and quite involved. But maybe it's not to them because they just have no idea what it entails, and that might make us feel slightly odd and slightly uncomfortable in that respect. And also, some of you will have seen this article written by Shelley Walsh at the Search Engine Journal on the State of SEO survey, which was carried out late last year, and management issues, approvals, internal buy-in, etc., is one of the very big issues that we actually face all of the time. But we have so many other issues on our plate that we don't really want that kind of situation anymore, right? So don't we? A little bit about myself. Just very briefly, I'm an international SEO and digital marketing consultant working in between consultancy and in-house clients, mostly on product marketing, SaaS, e-commerce, and in roles where my project management skills have been a requirement. Today, I would like you to take away what's the project, the skills needed for that, how beneficial can be for SEO, and the benefits for yourselves as professionals. This is not an inspirational talk, as it might have looked like from the very beginning. What I am trying to make you understand is how to manage the many moving parts every single project does have. Think about content, offsite, etc. It can be really complicated at times, particularly if the project is actually enterprise project. So this is just a way for you to understand how you can make sense of it all and continue and deliver the work that you are supposed to deliver. Many of these concepts will actually be quite familiar. You might be quite familiar with, hopefully. And if not, there is a window of opportunity for you to actually dig deeper into this so that it can help you out to in your projects to use them for your own benefit. This talk goes beyond Notion, so all these productivity tools, which you should know about at all times. But I'm not going to be talking about Asana, etc. And in case there is a little bit of a skepticism about project management, or you feel slightly lazy about this starts will actually tell you how important this is still becoming. I mean, it has been growing for a number of years, and I believe this is here to stay. Always remember what's in it for you. An easier delivery, easier internal buying, etc., etc. It's not like you are not getting all these things already. It's just that you will be able to actually get them more easily. First things first, what's a project? Because we tend to use the word project in a very ambiguous way. It's just another word that we tend to use for lack of a better word in most cases. It's a bit like marketing and philosophy. I bet you didn't know philosophy was a technical word, but it really is a technical term. And the word project carries a very specific meaning to it, but somewhat strict, right? The PMI Institute, which is one of the institutions that look after project managers and project management, defines project as a temporary endeavor. I mean, there are a few definitions going around. They are all very, very, very similar. This one in particular talks about temporary endeavor to create a unique project service or results. Each project has these elements: objectives, resources, timing, costs, and scope, all of which are very well defined and tied up at the very beginning of every project, because otherwise it becomes chaotic. It really does become chaotic. And if there is any element that is not well defined at the very beginning, then it is not part of the project. It's part of another project, perhaps, but not part of this project. And this is something really, really important to consider. So therefore, managing a project is the use of a specific framework, knowledge, skill set to deliver something of value. And you see, anything of value to you might not be of value to somebody else. So this is where it is really important to define what exactly a project is and what is going to deliver at the end. This is my own definition, by the way. And what I would like to highlight from here is the greater reliability, because that I mentioned at the end, because what happens is that each project carries a certain amount of uncertainty, which we are trying as project managers to make sure that it doesn't really get in the way. And some projects do carry out some more uncertainty, but what happens is that when a project is managed correctly, this uncertainty becomes lower, decreases. So just to bear in mind, value, final deliverable, specific objectives, and a definite time and budget. Project phases. So contrary to what most people seem to think, planning is not the first phase. First of all, we need to know what we are planning. So this is the initiation phase, where we actually vet ideas or filter out ideas that may or may not have an importance in terms of achieving an objective that helps us meet a company need. So first of all, we identify a business need, and then we think about how we are going to achieve, or how we're going to meet that need. Once we actually have that, we plan it. Planning it means that we deliver a roadmap. We deliver a list of resources. It can be human, can be equipment, can be timing, can be budget. Generally speaking, we think about risk assessments, how we can produce a plan to back up everything, so that in case there are any problems, we just don't fall behind. And something else that we need to understand is what we actually do need to deliver this project in terms of equipment, and I would really like to highlight this. The execution is the most fun part of this process. And it's also a very important one because no great idea is good without a good performance and without good execution of that. So we need to execute it. Something else to highlight from this phase is the fact that project managers might need to redirect a project. And this is exactly where they actually do it. So for example, we have a very big website audit, an enterprise one, with a subdomain, which is a blog. That blog is perhaps just carrying different issues, different problems that make us think perhaps that we are not going to be delivering on time, and maybe it's not as important to fix that blog as compared to the rest of the website. So the project manager might think, oh, maybe we can leave this out for the time being and consider it after the project is finishing. Performance monitoring is rather important here because at the very beginning, we need to understand what we are going to do and how we are going to be monitoring it. The way we monitor a project is not the way we monitor every single task in marketing or digital marketing or SEO. We might use cost efforts metric, or maybe how well we are placed in achieving our objective within the time specified. There are different metrics. And then the project closure, which is by far the most involved part of the project. In here, the project manager sits back, and thinks about what has been achieved, what hasn't been achieved, what the problems have been, any problems, any issues that may have arisen, how they have been sorted out, and what next steps there are to consider for the next projects. Something else to consider here is the admin side of things, which is rather important because we need to produce a project report. We need to debrief meetings, so hold debrief meetings, etc., etc. And I keep talking about project managers. They are the ones who put the puzzle pieces together, the ones who make sure that everybody is working in the same direction towards achieving the same objective, and they are motivated to do so. You might have perhaps seen so far that managing an SEO project or any other type of project is not an easy task. It really is no small task either. It involves so many different bits and pieces, from feasibility tasks at the very beginning to managing communication, to which I will touch upon later on, producing reports, manage a team, etc., etc. So this is something that project managers we need to make sure that transpires, that all stakeholders understand what we do, what we don't do. Oops. As project managers, we actually look into the different methodologies that we can use. And the way we choose the right methodology is not about fads, it's not about fashionable thinking or anything. We need to consider a variety of matters, a variety of aspects, such as project scope, the size of the company, the team size, industry sector, etc., etc. This graphic is from a couple of years, actually from a Statista. I don't really think things will actually have changed so much during this time due to the pandemic. And as you can see, predictive, which is another word for waterfall, is still the most used methodology, project methodology right now. Even when we think about agile, hybrid, etc., might actually go to the news headlines quite a bit. I think predictive tends to be the most reliable in many respects. Think about a migration website where and we need to actually deliver something with a high degree of uncertainty, we need a methodology that basically allows us to handle that uncertainty. And the waterfall methodology is the most suitable one. Hybrid or agile, where there are many opinions, etc., is probably not the best one. What to avoid or how to avoid having headaches? First of all, lack of good communication. You need to be able to make everyone understand what you are doing, why you are doing it, and how you are doing it. And that's about it. It is really important because this is the sole source of every single aspects that we might need to avoid within a company, within a project, etc., etc. Friction, conflicts may arise from lack of good communication. Not knowing the business is something really important to avoid because let's be honest, we can't do keyword research if we don't know what the company does, what their objectives are, their target audiences, etc., etc. The same happens with losing sight of every single aspect of the objective. It really is very, very important that we keep the objective in sight, because otherwise there would be chaos. And going back to lack of good communication, sometimes not being assertive nor firm can actually set us back. Yeah, it's very, very important. Think about all those stakeholders whose job is not to do with knowing what you do, but what you do may actually affect their day-to-day job. You need to understand that and explain them very firmly, very calmly what you do. But you may have already explained it about 100,000 times already. You may have produced a lovely report which most people will have skimmed through. Really, let's just be honest. So you need to be calm and assertive. In fact, a good project and a bad project is mostly to do with how well you avoid all those things that I have already talked about. Something I would like to highlight here is that a project that might have been undertaken in the past or which will be undertaken in the future are not the same as the project that you are undertaking right now. The projects tend to be unique. And in fact, they are not the same. They are not the same, and you need to make sure that you adapt your project methodologies and the rest to the company where you are working. It's not the same working in an enterprise or working in an SME or working in media, etc., etc. But what it is very clear is that account management is only dedicated to the happiness of the clients, not to achieving an objective, a project objective. Those tasks are definitely not a project. And I have come across some people who use graphics and they just think, oh, this is a project. And it's not, it really is not. A project has all of the elements that we have spoken about before. But also the use of graphics is actually really important, because coming back again to communication, you need to understand how to communicate with the different stakeholders. And decision trees or decision workflows might be really, really important, really interesting to use to explain, for example, how it is that you have decided to redirect a project. And a dashboard might be very useful for you and your team to understand where you are at with a project. You need to consider all this. The benefits for SEO are quite important because your productivity is higher. It definitely is higher. It's just having everything very well defined and very well tied up makes a difference. And again, we don't work in silos. In fact, most projects tend to have different people from different departments, different teams, or with different dependencies within the company. And so it allows you to see different areas within the company, which is always going to be very, very, very useful to you. It also avoids execution issues, such as who does what, why is she doing this, these playground fights. Project management avoids all these kind of things. And then your work is taken much more seriously, because think about all these projects and plans that every single department is required to put together at the very beginning of the year. So if you present them with a project charter, project documentation, etc., this is a language they will be able to understand. And so, as you may have guessed, the skills needed are organizational, 110%. You definitely need to be an organized person or learn to be one of them, because otherwise the project can be chaotic. Communication skills, I think, is an understatement already. Resilience, you need to be super resilient as well, because sometimes what happens is that you may come across people who are supposed to know about this project because of the many meetings and reports and everything, but they've got so many other priorities to take care of, they may actually not understand anything at all. So they may come to you and say, what are you doing? So you need to be very resilient. Having a thick skin can be really useful to you. And timekeeping is all about dependencies. So if you have agreed to finish with keyword research by, say, the day after tomorrow, don't do it after that, because it means that maybe content production might get delayed. And this can actually have a bearing on your reputation, your credibility as a project manager. You can project manage everywhere, really, at enterprise level, smaller companies, or even your own projects. So just try and see how well it goes, just for you to practice, and then you can actually put it into practice at work. What I particularly enjoy is all this, the fact that I can get things done more easily. My skills are transferable. I can use them here, there, and everywhere, really. I can introduce new things. And those of you who are responsible for Google Analytics as well will not have seen probably a well set up Google Analytics account ever. This is your opportunity to introduce one, particularly now with GA. Before, right? You get to know other business areas as well, and it can definitely help raise your profile internally. And this is something that I noticed once it happens, something for you to consider. So I'm just finishing now. My main takeaways are to think about project management as a way to take away some of that anxiety that you might feel at the very beginning. Cover your back. Everything needs to be on a scope and in writing, because otherwise it's not part of the project. Yeah, you already have a lot on your plate. It needs to meet a business need 100%. Otherwise, it's not worth doing any project. And your skills are transferable to different projects and companies. Always remember what's in it for you at all times. And the fact that the project economy, which is how the PMI has called it, is here to stay. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. Here are some resources in case you are interested. I can share my deck later. And thank you very much for listening.
Montserrat, we really wanted to thank you for such a great presentation on an often not talked about part of SEO, but a really important part of SEO, which is project management. It's something that I deal with on a daily basis and try to figure out, what projects should I really focus on, what projects shouldn't I? So we really want to thank you for being a part of this and just talking about project management and the importance of it in the SEO space.
Yeah.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you, Montserrat. And we're going to go again to another brief pause, and we'll be right back.
participating as part of SEO Day.
Woohoo! Hope this works. Cool.
How are you, John?
Wow. Pretty good. Pretty good. It's cool to be able to join you, at least virtually.
Yeah, of course. So thank you very much for being here with us. And the virtual stage is yours. We don't want to take any of your more time because I know we're going to have plenty of questions afterwards. So it's all yours, John.
Cool. Fantastic. Okay, so I have a short presentation about some of the things that have been happening around Google search. I think you can see it. Is that correct?
I think you were just about to see it now.
Okay. Cool.
Yep.
There we go. Fantastic. Cool. Okay. And I don't have any explicit answers about what will happen in the future because that would be too easy. And obviously, we try not to do that. And I think the bigger thing is also that sometimes it's hard to know ahead of time what will actually happen in the future. Sometimes we have something lined up to launch tomorrow, and then something goes wrong, or someone mentions something, and then it gets put off for a year. Unfortunately, that sometimes happens. But anyway, sometimes you can guess a little bit about what's happening based on some of the activity that is happening around Google search. So maybe you can kind of like see the future yourself here. And as you mentioned, we do have time afterwards for questions and answers. So please send us your questions if you're watching this. Not exactly sure how you submit them, but I'm sure there's a simple way to do that. So let's get started. So for those of you that don't know me, I lead the search relations team at Google, which is basically a group of people who try to communicate around search, who connect with everyone who's making websites, who's trying to optimize websites, who's trying to understand how their content is performing in search, and the internal Google search teams. And the internal Google search teams includes the Search Console team, who makes the fantastic tools that you're all probably using, hopefully, as well as the search infrastructure teams who are working on things like making crawling and indexing work well, and to some extent also the side of search that shows the search results, that does some of the ranking side of things as well. And we create documentation videos, like you mentioned. We work with the policy folks to make the policies. We work with the feature team so that everyone kind of understands what people like you really want from Google search, and that we can try to work with that feedback and try to make something that works well for you all and that works well for Google as well, in terms of making it easier for you to create awesome things, makes it easier for us to show those awesome things. So I have a bunch of things in my presentation, kind of what has been happening around the last year or so, things that I think stand out a little bit, and which I suspect are important for people to kind of focus on. So first off is Search Console. I mentioned that before. It's a tool that every site can use. It's something you can verify your site in there. You get access to lots of cool tools, lots of information about your website, about how Google search works. One of the things there that has been kind of a trend, I'd say, over the past half year or so is domain level verification, where we're really seeing it's worthwhile for sites to set up the domain level verification because it makes it so much easier to kind of handle all of the combinations of www or non-www or HTTP, HTTPS, those kind of things. All of that gets a little bit easier. And the newer tools that are in Search Console, they all work really well on the domain level. So that's something where I would recommend, if you haven't taken a look at domain level verification just because you never needed it, I would recommend trying that out. The other neat tool that has come up, I think in the last half year or so, is Search Console Insights, which is something that you basically, if you have your site verified in Search Console, you basically automatically have access to Search Console Insights. And Search Console Insights is a much simpler way of looking at your site's performance in search. And this is essentially made for all of those smaller businesses who are trying to make sense out of what Google is telling them. And going to Search Console is like trying to control a rocket ship. So in Search Console Insights, it's a lot more simplified. It uses analytics and Search Console data together. So it's also a little bit of a different view of the data that you get there. And one of the neat things that the team does there is send you these kind of milestone reports, like the one shown here, where it's like, congratulations, your site has reached such a big audience in search now. The kind of taking a step back up from Search Console Insights and like going even past the user interface in Search Console itself, there are two ways that you can also get even more information out of Search Console data. The first one is using BigQuery. BigQuery and Data Studio, these are two tools that you can use from Google's side to essentially look at, I don't know, they call it big data, essentially. Like that's kind of the buzzword for that. It's essentially a way of connecting different data sources together and creating really fancy reporting. And this is something where if you want to go a little bit past just what Search Console is showing you, or if you want to create custom reports for your clients and you don't want it to look like Search Console, you can use Data Studio to really make something super fancy. And the connection there is fairly easy to set up. But going from just having the connection to doing really fancy things, there's a wide range that you can go. So you can like really go crazy and make really fancy reports there. We have a blog post series about that. We have, I think, also videos on setting that up. So I would check that out if you want to go a little bit past just the UI in Search Console. And if you want to go even further, we have a set of APIs in Search Console, and we've been working to expand that over time as well. And these APIs are essentially ways of connecting to the data directly and connecting it to some code that you have running on your own side. And that could be something like a small program or a script that you have that monitors the top queries for your site, or that checks specific URLs to see if they're actually indexed or not. It could be a lot more. And there are scripts like this that you can use for Google Spreadsheets, for other kind of basic SEO tools where you can combine that data together to make also, again, more information available to you to make better decisions around Google search. So those are kind of the two steps up. Then the topic that I'm sure you've also talked about over time, Core Web Vitals and the page experience ranking factor. This is something that we launched, I think, last year as a specific ranking factor. And we have the three main metrics, the LCP, FID, and CLS, which is, I think, largest contentful paint, first input delay, and cumulative layout shift. Wow, such fancy words. And these are essentially metrics to measure the responsiveness and the speed of your web pages. Together with other factors, we combine them in the page experience ranking factor, and we do use that for ranking. In Search Console, you have information about this as well in the form of Chrome user experience report data. So that's the CRUX here on the slide. One thing that's I think important here is for search and in Search Console, we show the so-called field data, which is collected over a period of about a month from actual users of your website. And with the various testing tools that you have available, you can do a so-called lab test, which is basically a test for this specific situation, what the testing tool would say there. And that data often doesn't match up completely because what users see might be different from what you see when you test it yourself. And it's important to keep in mind that search uses what users actually see. So if you do something to tweak the test and kind of get a really good test result, but it doesn't actually make the page faster, then that's not really going to help you for your site. The other thing I think that is really important to mention with all of the page experience and Core Web Vitals side is oftentimes if you're using a popular CMS, they work on speed as well on their side. And they work to try to make it as easy as possible for you to have really fast results. So sometimes if you're using a platform like Wix or WordPress or Squarespace or whatever, sometimes they're also working for you. So that's something, especially for smaller sites, if they're using these platforms, they get these advantages automatically. And lastly, I think it's really important also to mention this is not a tiebreaker. It's not something that will make or break your website completely in search, but it is a factor that comes into play with regards to ranking between different results. So it's not just kind of like, does it subtly change which of these URLs is higher or lower? It is something that can have a ranking effect. Where it won't have an effect is if someone is looking for your name, because if they're looking for your name, then obviously the relevance is fairly strong there. Like, why would we show anything else? Two newer things around page experience that I thought I would mention is first, we started launching the desktop side as well. That happened earlier this year. And with the desktop page experience data, the way that it works is desktop users in search see the rankings based on the desktop page experience data that is collected from users who use it on desktop, and the same for mobile. So if your site is really fast on desktop, then obviously that plays in your favor. On the other hand, if your site is really slow on desktop, then obviously desktop users will potentially see that change. And another thing specific to not the core Web Vitals, but we kind of call it that bigger group of metrics that we collect on the Chrome side, the Web Vitals overall, is INP, Interaction to Next Paint, which is a new metric that was introduced, I think, at Google I/O this year, specifically from the Chrome side to try to address some of the concerns that were around the first input delay there. And this data is currently in the Chrome User Experience Report. So if you want to take a look at your site to see how it's performing in that regard, you can check that out. It's not a part of the Core Web Vitals at the moment, so it's not a ranking factor directly, but it is kind of one of those things that are being discussed as future things that might, I don't know, play a role at some point. It's hard to say. But it just kind of to keep an open mind, and my recommendation is to kind of follow these discussions and see what the pros and cons are, how people are measuring this, what kind of results they're seeing there, so that you're kind of a little bit ahead of the curve with regards to discussions around metrics, around speed. And whether or not this will actually become a part of Core Web Vitals, I don't know. But it is something that you can look at. Then we have core updates. I hear a lot about core updates, both internally and externally. Core updates are essentially bigger updates that we make in our search systems, and they affect search and discover. And we make these several times a year, trying to address what we can do to make the search results more and more relevant for our users, essentially. And with any kind of update that we make, any bigger update, we'll see some sites that go up in rankings, some sites will go down in rankings. And it's sometimes really tricky to tell folks what they should be looking at specifically. So we have a fairly comprehensive blog post about core updates that I would recommend checking out, especially if you're seeing kind of negative changes after these core updates with regards to your websites. So lots of questions that you can ask yourself, things where I would also say it's really important to get an objective feedback around these changes so that you're not just using your own opinion and saying, of course, my site is the best. You're actually getting more of an objective opinion from other people as well. With regards to the core updates, we also regularly mention the Quality Raters Guide. The Quality Raters Guide is a gigantic PDF, which has lots of information in it about how our quality raters should look at sites. And our quality raters don't make the rankings. They don't decide how things will be ranked, but rather they help us to understand where there might be issues with our search results, or to understand what the differences are between different algorithms that we roll out. And they give us, on a very broad level, feedback and say, well, actually, this algorithmic change that you made was bad, and this one was overall good. And to help them make those decisions in a transparent way, we publish these quality rater guidelines, I don't know, once a year, or whenever updates happen to take place there. It's a pretty big PDF, so it's a little bit intimidating at first, but I would strongly recommend taking a look. And there are also various folks externally who have taken a look at this and kind of refined it into details of what to watch out for. But still, I find it really valuable. One of the things that comes up with regards to quality regularly when people come to me is they say, like, oh, I cleaned up all of my paginated URLs, or I removed this filtered set of pages from the search results. That improves my site's quality, right? And of course, it does improve your site's quality a little bit, but the technical changes on your website don't really change the overall quality of your website. And when it comes to quality, we really look at things completely. So that's something where I would also take a look at the quality rater guidelines a little bit, because a lot of times these kind of technical things where, as an SEO, when you try to solve technical problems, you look at these and try to fix those. Those are not the things that the quality raters would watch out for. And with that, it's often not the kind of thing where I would say our quality algorithms would be skewed by. So of course, cleaning things up, making things reasonable is a good idea. But just by doing some technical cleanup, you're not significantly improving the quality of your website. So my recommendation is really to kind of like actually double down on the actual quality and the value that you're providing. Like I mentioned before, other people outside of Google also talk about these core updates, and specifically about the quality rater guides. So I would check out their blog posts, videos, conference presentations, reports. Some have sample flowcharts on how to look at these kind of problems, and try to understand a little bit more, especially if you have a website that is active in the more critical areas of the web, where it's really important that users, when they go to your website, that they actually are able to trust this information. So for example, if you have a medical site that is giving some medical advice, that's something where if you're providing it in a way that users look at it and say, well, I don't know if I should really trust this person to, I don't know, take specific vitamins or whatever, that's something where it definitely makes sense to watch out for these kind of topics. And again, the quality rater guidelines have a lot of information on this. So I would definitely check those out. OK, moving over to images and video. So we tend to talk about images and video every now and then on the search side, because there's a lot of technical things that you can do to implement them properly. We see that people really love these kind of videos and authentic images in the search results, so we try to show them a little bit more. At Google I/O this year in May, we gave a preview of a set of video reports that is coming to Search Console. My understanding is that's still lined up, but if you're kind of curious what might be happening in Search Console as a way of sneaking into the future, I would double check the search session that we did there together with Dikla Cohen, and kind of see like what is happening there with the video content, especially if you're hosting a lot of videos on your site yourself. Short videos are also more and more visible in the search results. At least I see this anecdotally from SEOs who are tweeting about it, be it YouTube Shorts, which is I think like maximum 30 seconds short videos that you can do on YouTube. TikTok, other platforms as well have kind of the capability to host and play short-form videos, and they're really popular. Similar also web stories, which are not videos directly, but kind of like a collection of pages, and often they include videos as well. For web stories, there's a WordPress plugin from us that has a lot of functionality to make it easier to create these web stories. And kind of also externally, Brody Clark has a really neat guide to image thumbnails in search. I don't think we have a ton of information on our site with regards to image thumbnails, so I thought that was a really nice compilation of the different variations and options on how images can be directly visible in the search results. E-commerce is also super important, big topic. We see e-commerce growing and growing, especially with the pandemic. When all of that happened, everyone went and bought their things online because, of course, the stores were closed. Like everything around e-commerce, online shopping, that's still super hot and something that the teams have been working on as well. If you haven't taken a look at things like Merchant Center and tried out different product feeds to set up an e-commerce site, I would definitely try that out. The setup with Merchant Center, I believe, is something that is available for every site. It's not something that requires paid access. So it's worthwhile to double check that and try that out. We also have a lot more guidance in our search documentation now for e-commerce, directly in the search documentation on the one side, as well as a video series that's still ongoing with Alan Kent from my team, who talks about some of the technical issues around e-commerce and how you can deal with that. And similar, kind of related to e-commerce, are product reviews. This is something where I didn't realize this at first, but actually there's a pretty large overlap here. On the one hand, you can sell the product directly. On the other hand, you can do a review and kind of indirectly sell that product. And we have a lot of guidance on product reviews because people have high expectations of reviews that they find online. So we've also worked specifically on updates to algorithms with regards to ranking of these product reviews. And the guidance there in our documentation is always kind of the same as you should probably know to provide high-quality content, in-depth content, authentic reviews. Especially that last one is something that I often see when I look at reviews as being a little bit tricky. Like you can tell that they haven't actually taken a look at the product directly, but rather they're reporting on the specifications as listed on the original site. Then we have title links. So this is something that kind of, I don't know, almost subtly changed on our side. In the early days or in the beginning, we called everything a title. That was basically the website title as well as a title shown in the search results. And now to make it a little bit clearer that these are actually different things, we call the things that in the search results that are like titles, we call them title links because they're links that are kind of like a title of the page, but not always directly. We have a lot of documentation, or more documentation at least now, on how title links work, how we put them together. We have information on how we use headlines to kind of help improve title links for your pages. And specifically for multilingual pages, we have some guidelines on what you should watch out for. So this is something that, depending on your region, we see more or less, in that maybe a page will be in Spanish, but the title is in English because for whatever reason. And we want to make sure that the title that we show, or the title link that we show in the search results, is actually kind of matching the main content of the page. So if the page is in Spanish, then the title link that we show should also be in Spanish. And if you have preference of what title link should be shown, then obviously the title on your page that you provide should also be in Spanish. And I think we're getting pretty close to the end, so hopefully people are submitting questions. We have a handful of other things that I thought I would mention because I find them kind of important, and kind of worthwhile. On the one hand, there's SiteKit, which is a WordPress plugin that folks nearby on our team are working on, which tries to include the different ways of data from Google into a WordPress dashboard. So especially if you're working with WordPress, this is a fantastic way of getting that really complete overview of what is happening with regards to Google on your site. And I believe it also has access to Question Hub, that kind of new setup where you get some of the questions that couldn't be answered in search to help write new content. So that's something I would definitely try out if you're using WordPress. Then mobile-first indexing. We haven't really talked about this in a while, but it's still kind of ongoing. We have the last steps that are taking place here. And probably for those sites that still haven't gotten shifted over, that will happen, my guess is, in the next month or so. Or you'll get a notification that maybe there's some issues that make it impossible for us to switch a site over. Then index if embedded, which is a new robots meta tag. We try not to make a lot of new robots meta tags because it just takes a long time for people to understand what they mean and how to use them, or whether or not they should use them at all. Index if embedded is essentially for situations where you're embedding some other content within your main page, and you kind of want to control the indexing of that embedded piece of content. So that could be, for example, a video page that you're embedding with an iframe. It could be, I don't know, maybe a PDF that you're embedding with an iframe, those kind of things. And then the web spam report, which we do about yearly nowadays, has a lot of information on how the web spam team has been kind of working on improving things for the search results overall. So I think that's pretty much it. And I heard a voice in the background somewhere. Cool. Yeah, like I said, this is pretty much it from my side. Kind of the updates that have been happening and kind of the interpolations of where you think this might be happening, which are probably happening in your head. So bunch of links here if you want to find out more. And otherwise, we can switch to questions and answers.
Great. Thank you very much, John. Really appreciate the talk. I think it's already creating a bit of buzz on Twitter, so I'm sure you'll get even more questions than we have for you today on there as well, as you do. But yeah, no, we have a few questions from the audience members and from team members as well. So let's get started, yeah.
And John, I'm so excited to actually ask you my first question ever, because I haven't asked you one on Twitter yet. Didn't want to bother you. But if you had to mention only one factor to optimize in search, what would it be and why?
Only one factor.
It's a tough one, I know.
I don't know. I think the main one would really be making sure that you have the keyword targeting right for your pages, that you're targeting something that actually makes sense for your audience, and that you have that actually mentioned on your pages. Okay.
And in terms of different kinds of updates, we've had a few talks previously, and sometimes they roll out globally for all languages at the same time, and sometimes they roll out in specific languages and then continue for the rest of the regions. Is there any particular kind of decision-making process in terms of saying, hey, we'll roll out in English and then we'll say 2 weeks for everything else? Do you guys have a rule of thumb, or how do you kind of figure out when to finish implementing in one language and when is it able to be rolled out for the rest?
Good question. So I just did a video on this actually maybe a week or so ago. So hopefully I have the same answer still. But essentially, we try as much as possible to make things global. So that's kind of the initial thought process, to make sure that anything that we roll out if at all possible, that we can do it in a global way. Sometimes what happens is that we'll start off with a small set of users that get it, and then incrementally we will test it, do this kind of A/B testing, and then roll it out from there. That sometimes happens. But sometimes there are also things that we just can't do globally. So that might be things where we have to understand the language really well. And we have to make sure that the model works first. And then at some point, we can kind of take that and say, well, OK, now we can apply it to other languages, which is sometimes why you see things roll out in English first or in other languages even. And the third variation that sometimes happens is there are policy reasons why we can't do something globally, like from the start. And that could be, I don't know, like things where maybe the lawyers are a little bit worried, or maybe, I don't know, other factors that kind of play in there where we say, well, we have to be really careful with regards to rolling this out. We will try it out in individual countries first, and then from there we'll see, is this something that we can roll out globally, or maybe we have to be more careful and we shouldn't roll it out globally. But essentially the goal is really to make everything global as soon as we can.
And the next question, John, is, and this is one that's been talked about in the SEO community a lot, is how certain is it that Google will discontinue results pages and actually replace them with infinite scrolling?
How certain? Like nothing is certain. I don't know. It's one of those things that I've just seen at Google over time. It's like everything is in flux, and you always end up testing things out and trying things out and doing these kind of A/B tests where you see, does it work or does it not work? And one of the things I've noticed over the years is sometimes changes are just a little bit too early or a little bit too late, in that we'll try something out and then we'll see, oh, it doesn't work with the audience. And then you try it out, the same thing, maybe 2-3 years later, and then suddenly it works because people just have different expectations. And from that point of view, that's also, I think, kind of goes into this continuous scrolling setup, which I think we announced in some languages or some regions. I don't know if we have it everywhere nowadays or if it's just on mobile. But it's one of those things where I know the team is always testing this, and they would probably like to go in that direction because people are just used to scrolling rather than clicking next. But how that will actually roll out kind of depends also on how people accept that.
No, I agree, and I think it comes down also to kind of user experience. At 20 years ago, 15 years ago, we needed that next button. We needed a very clear call to action. How do I keep moving forward? And clearly our behaviors and our thumbs have definitely evolved over time, so that it makes sense that it would go kind of in that direction. And kind of continuing on that point of something that's ever evolving, and one of the not so recent, but fairly recent changes has to do with maybe the rewriting of title tags and meta descriptions. And maybe in the industry before, it was kind of like, I know if I put a title tag, it's going to be there. I can sleep easy. Everything's great. And now that Google is, trying to interpret that context, and let's say, I can maybe make this a little bit better than you have it going on. Personally, I've experienced sometimes, not so much from an SEO side, that there's pushback. We understand why it's happening, and we understand, where it's kind of going. But sometimes from non-SEO stakeholders, maybe in-house marketing teams that say, hey, I need my product name to be specifically this, because this is, we've spent a lot of time and a lot of money to develop the way this. So are there any particular recommendations into kind of helping brands and helping companies make sure that they're getting the right message across with their title tags on Google?
Title links. You have to watch out for the new name.
Oh, title links. There we go.
I think we have a lot of documentation now on making it more consistent. So making it a little bit easier to understand what is actually happening here and what could you do to kind of like push what you think should be the title. And you can't like I don't know, push it completely. We still have kind of the flexibility to adjust things a little bit, because we just see so many really bad titles where the page will just be called home. And like, well,
Yes.
It's not a house, it's a website. Like, what do you do?
On best case scenarios, we have a home. Sometimes that's the best case scenario to have that as a title link. So, okay, great. Thank you, John. And I think we have one more question.
Yeah, and John, one thing that being at a news publisher, I hear about a lot is zero-click searches, right? And we've obviously seen them increase a ton on Google. So this obviously means a lot less traffic for websites in the news space and in other spaces as well. Are there any plans to potentially change this?
I don't know. So I don't have a lot of insight into the whole zero-click search thing, which to some extent, I don't know, is kind of tricky anyway. But I do know the teams at Google, they care a lot about the whole ecosystem side of things. And it's something where they understand that if they make changes that are kind of like not good for the ecosystem, then in the long run, that will have negative effects for us as well. And the folks at Google are really, at least the folks that I've worked with on the search side, they really look out for that long view and try to find ways to make sure that it's actually something where we work together and provide something better for users overall. And that works together with the people who are creating content, the people who are publishing things, who are running the websites, doing the technical work, that everyone kind of gets something good out of that whole ecosystem effect there.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, John, for the time, not only on your talk, but to answer all these particular questions. It's always a pleasure to have you here with us. And I know the audience and everybody at home and in the office and on the couch and maybe a little bit on the bed, a little bit everywhere, are definitely enjoyed having you here as well. So thank you very much.
And I'm going to start bugging you on Twitter, John. Be sure about it.
All right.
You've already created rapport. It's okay. Thank you,
Cool.
John. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
So again, we're going to go for a brief pause. Come right back. We have the next talk. It's going to be a very interesting one.
Hi everyone, it's me again, and now to tell you that you can leave all of your questions on social media. You just have to post your question with the hashtag SEOday. Let's go back now to Claudio.
Thank you, Tef.
Thank you, Tef.
So in the next talk, we're going to hear about something called on-SERP SEO, which is extremely important for news brands, for agencies, and what was going on with the matter in 2022. And that's why we invited Izzy Smith to join this event. So Izzy works as a technical SEO team lead at Write. She's also been part of the SEO industry for more than 6 years and has spoken in different conferences like Brighton SEO and Google Webmaster Conference. But the most important bullet of all is that Izzy's the best at sharing jokes and memes on social media. So you have to follow her, not only for her SEO expertise, but also the fact that she's actually really funny. So we want to welcome Izzy and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here. It's such an international conference. So I'm very happy to be on the stage. Thank you.
And we're very happy to have you, Izzy, as well. And just to continue with the most important bullet point of all, if we're not having fun, what are we doing? Right? So I think that's a great way also to get certain messages across. Absolutely. And even to have some conversations that are not so easy or not so correct, yeah. Having fun and having a good laugh is always very important for that. So we're very happy to have you here, and the virtual stage is all yours.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Izzy. This is my friend Google. Now, Google's main task is to provide the best possible search results for users, and they aim to achieve results that are relevant, reliable, universally accessible, and presented in the most useful way. Now, this final point is actually much more important than just a visual appearance. I don't know if you saw my friend Google at home, but there they are. And yes, because the act of searching is constantly evolving, like we've just touched upon with John in the Q&A session then. We are no longer seeking a document, we are seeking fast answers, and we're searching for inspiration as well most of the time. So of course, a presented list of documents and links where I probably need to do my own homework and search even further, where I need to make my own decision and spend time on that. That's just not satisfactory enough anymore. So to achieve this goal, Google began visualizing responses in more helpful ways, and thus the search enhancement was born. These appear, for example, for recipes, when the time it takes to cook or the user ratings can really help influence a searcher in their choice and decision making. You will know these enhancements as rich results. These are displayed inline within a search snippet. There are many flavors of rich results. I'm sure you've seen them or you've optimized for them before. Or maybe for news stories where the relevant, crucial information of when this article was published is highlighted below there. These are known as top stories. They're now displayed in a multitude of different ways. You can view your own website's enhancements directly in Google Search Console. Most of the organic ones are there. And these days, wow, there's a lot of images. These days there are a lot of different enhancements. There are actually over 45 of them. I'm going to be taking a look at a few today. Some of them are just variations on different types of rich results. So we don't need to take a look at each of them in detail. Don't worry. You can optimize for one and that will satisfy most of them. So, no, you can optimize for one and that will satisfy its variations. So don't worry too much about that. But you've probably noticed that these enhancements are climbing all over the SERPs. They appear as featured snippets that show a detailed description for a query taken from its below page. They appear as visual elements, as people also ask boxes that tweak a query and expand to show more info. They appear as related results that keep people on Google if they didn't find an answer yet, or as rich results with additional facts and a lot more. And when we get to mobile searches and mobile devices, SERP real estate is even harder to come by, and searches need to be delivered faster. So here, enhancements stand out much more, and they're more attention-grabbing. Now, these little guys work to satisfy the searcher's need. And Google doesn't provide these just because they're a generous educator, but because they want to guarantee also incoming revenue. If a searcher is not interacting with a paid result today during this very search, then Google still wants to provide useful, meaningful results that they will return to Google, and that a conversion, an ad conversion, becomes possible at a later stage. After all, 80% of Google's revenue comes from online advertising. So they want to make sure that this is staying the same or increasing, of course. And in fact, Google is so dedicated on providing enticing and satisfying results that they're willing to do some interesting, pretty questionable acts to create them. Whether that means extracting answers from pages to show an enhancement directly on the search engine result pages, whether that means sometimes showing links to competitors on branded SERPs, your branded SERPs, force rewriting your tags, and a lot more. So what does this mean for us SEOs? Are we going to lose traffic? Are we going to lose revenue? Are we going to lose our jobs? Let's find out in my terrifying SEO day talk. Help, SERP features stole my organic results. Hosted by yours truly, Izzy Smith, as a scared SEO. Actually, that is a lie. I am playing the role, as always, as the optimistic SEO. Here is a brief biography. All you need to know is that I work at the wonderful company Right. I am British, in case you couldn't tell, but I do live in Germany. So how big is the SERP feature threat? Do we have a real problem on our hands? How much do we have to deal with? So let's take a high-level look at the current state of SERP features. I focused on mobile devices in this check. You can find more insights on the SEMrush sensor. I also took the US, so the results will vary for whichever country and market you're dedicated to. So it really fulfills all expectations here that SERPs are incredibly visual, as over a third of them contain a video or an image. It's also no shock or no surprise that knowledge panels are incredibly present. They're across almost 30% of SERPs. And yeah, it's really not surprising that only 1.8% of SERPs don't have any kind of feature on them. So these days, it's really common to find a search engine result page with some different type of visualization or enhancement on there, at least one or two. A question we all like to wonder is, are these search features working? Well, we'll never have the real insights on how much these kind of results are interacted with. But we can be confident that Google wouldn't release anything to search results unless they work. They have a very rigorous testing process through various means like live experiments or relying on their search quality raters. So in 2020 alone, Google introduced 3,600 launches based on all these different tests and experiments there. And we can also see very visibly that people are returning to Google. None of their competitors have got even close in the past 10 years. So Google is in a good place, but they want to ensure that they stay in this top spot, that they're growing every year. But of course, not everyone is as thrilled about this as Google probably are. We are reading and hearing a lot about high on-SERP satisfaction, which has the possibility to lead to zero-click searches. This is when a user doesn't need to use a result. They don't need to click on a link. They could just simply exit Google with their answer. They've been satisfied. So this yearly study that in the past, I think the last one was in 2021, was run by puntorojo using similar web data. Zero-click searches hit 68% in the US. And this is increasing rapidly, apparently. So based on all of this data, we have some potential threats. Us as organic growth marketers, SEOs, website owners, business owners, e-commerce managers, etc. These three main threats that I'm going to be going through today are revolving around losing traffic that our content should be earning, that deserves to earn because of a more satisfying result on the SERP. The second threat is the unexpected SERP features that can appear sometimes overnight that causes us to lose presence and control over our results. And finally, the inevitable shift in searcher behavior. The first threat is the largest one out of the three because it can really tangibly impact a very important KPI to us and to our stakeholders and clients. So losing traffic because of that high on-SERP satisfaction. So the zero-click searches. Searching for really simple, fact-based questions shows up quick answers because Google has built up over time this repository of partner data and their knowledge graph of all this connected data. And Google, of course, has moved away from being a search engine, and they're now a fully fledged answer engine. That's why this is taking place. There's a really fabulous SERP features glossary. This is created by Paige at Roast, the agency there. Do check it out. It just shows you how many types of satisfying enhancements there are out there. There's 45 in total without including those detailed variations. So like a recipe rich snippet isn't counted. That's just like a rich result. 13 of those belong to an organic result, for example, featured snippets, rich results, image thumbnails. And 4 of those are paid features like ads, shopping, flights, and hotels. The rest are powered by the fabulous knowledge graph, Google's vast collection of named entities and their attributes. But with so many to choose from, how does Google know which type of enhancement to play? Well, that all comes down to the search intent of the user. some of the best-known researchers in the information retrieval field propose 3 different levels of search intent. Informational, so someone seeking answers and knowledge; navigational, when you're wanting to visit or use a specific service; and transactional, when you're hoping to buy something. These 3 have really become the standard definitions, and they're used widely by SEOs and analysts like ourselves. The problem is these were proposed back in 2002, and as we all know, search is far different. It's more nuanced, it's more flexible, and it's more based on different situations than these 3 allow. So I personally like to perceive search intent based not only on the overarching goal in mind, but with the preferred method or delivery content type, as well as potential devices. We can't always cater to the device so much, but it can come into play in terms of which type of enhancement is shown. So the different methods being fast, I'm looking for quick facts and snippets. There's research methods where I require elaboration, I need to dig deeper. Learning mode as a method, for example, I prefer visual or auditory responses. Local, where proximity and place matters, and freshness, where I need some more trending topics. This is an issue or event that has taken place recently, and that really is crucial to me. And then the devices, where a desktop, probably the search has been made at home or at work, and a mobile search, maybe you're second screening or you're out of home. I don't have the time to go into each of these combinations for you all, but if you're really interested in learning a bit more about these more detailed types of search intents, I made a little Figma board so you can zoom in, you can read about each combination and the organic click chances there. And this is really my proposed theory of how search intent could be built upon these days, based on a lot of geeking out over information retrieval and analyzing the SERPs myself. And this is really what helps me in defining my priorities. We can't be 100% sure what classifications Google themselves use specifically, but we do know how they aim to perceive them, and that's by using the wonderful BERT. BERT models really can consider the full context of a query in a word by looking at surrounding terms. It's become so paramount in assessing searcher intent behind queries, and it is now used for almost all searches in English. So my advice to you today is to aim to be more BERT. So aim to properly understand and classify the search intent of your target queries. So by gathering information of what SERP features Google is using to cater to an intent, as well as any explicitly used terms in a keyword, you can create an estimated search intent and use that to create really fitting, really relevant content, as well as a structure to go with that. A number of tools out there really try and figure out the broad goals for you, like SEMrush and Systrix. I want to do a specific shout out as well to keywordinsights.ai, which is a really powerful tool used to create content clusters automatically, and they calculate search context based on the types of results that search engines use and display. I like to build custom segments within Write, who plugs into Google Search Console data. I provide explicit modifiers when possible. I'm pointing in the wrong direction. For example, this transactional segment that I have here, so the SAS transactional, contains really explicit modifiers like license, demo, trial, etc. And then I can pass these segments in as filters during my analyses and in reports and customize them whenever I like. Also, don't forget to consider the different impacts your SERPs can have. You may wish to focus solely on the types of keywords and queries that bring guaranteed clicks, and I don't blame you there. We have to focus somehow. However, there could be some really strong benefits and opportunities for optimizing for SERP enhancements that don't have much of an immediate chance of organic traffic. So I mentioned earlier that Google creates satisfying results, even if it doesn't result in a click to an ad, because it will therefore increase the chance a user can return and later click potentially a paid result. You should take a similar approach in order to either drive brand awareness or at best a click and a conversion further down the line. A satisfied short click today can lead to a satisfied long click when there is the intent to buy. So when targeting topics that don't fall into a primary goal, like a long satisfied click or a local business interaction, I like to consider if there is a secondary on SERP goal. For example, gaining more brand identity, where you should aim to enrich your brand's knowledge graph results to provide complete accuracy of information, or brand association, where you can be the best source of information to really provide those positive associations around your brand and a topic. Or taking over competitors, of course, is a good secondary goal on the SERPs, where you can stand out in your industry SERPs and take up more real estate. Oh, now my clicks aren't working. There we go. But for winning those long satisfied clicks as a primary goal, using structured data, quality content, correct formatting, and queries with a fitting intent, you can build those eye-catching features that qualify traffic with clear labels and attributes. It's not just about getting more traffic to your website, it's getting more qualified traffic that wants and deserves to be there. And then for those secondary goals of brand building, hitting these fulfillments like keeping your brand knowledge graph up to date, being seen as a trusted source of information, and being associated with your core entity category provides lots of benefits when a click isn't possible. Now, the second threat we're looking at today and resolving, hopefully, are those surprise new features and enhancements. This is really inevitable. Adapting to change is a key skill of a good SEO, so it shouldn't be too much of a shock for you all watching today. But it's definitely worth bearing in mind because SERP layouts can really change overnight. Google brings us many gifts each year in the form of different enhancements to our search results and our snippets. As I mentioned earlier, Google is testing and releasing a hefty amount of updates each year. They can range from, while we can't always be super aware of all of these changes or react accordingly, nor should we always react, having a good bird's eye view of SERP updates helps us stay a little bit more prepared for inevitable changes that could come your way and affect your organic presence. A really fantastic resource for this would be Brody Clark's SERP feature timeline. I like to check in with this every so often in case there have been established updates that you could be cashing in on, or maybe you need to halt a certain task completely. And because SERP changes won't always affect my actual search performance, I also work a lot on creating alerts and monitoring systems for my projects and Write. So I'm using custom events, keyword monitoring, and anomaly detection, which I took a screenshot of today. This is notifying me when my Google Search Console data goes above or below an expected threshold, taking into account seasonality. So I can take immediate action when a potential update is affecting me negatively. Another interesting resource for potential SERP updates falls within Google's very public missions and goals. Like, for example, the page experience update has become a pretty big part of our lives as SEOs and website owners, but it should have come as no surprise, seeing as Google has been advocating for prioritizing website UX and accessibility for a long, long time. Another huge focus of Google, and thankfully of many, is the journey to a carbon-free business. So as well as using more green energy for their data centers, Google has rolled out various labels to search verticals. So they now show carbon emission details for flights and hotels, which is really cool. But do you know what is worse for the environment than the airline industry? Well, a study made well-known by the BBC found that the carbon footprint of the internet and its supporting systems make up 3.7% of global greenhouse gas emissions, which is similar to, if not more than, the airline industry. So maybe eventually we could see SERP features like this, where emissions of websites or their pages are shown directly in the search results. Maybe it's not such an outrageous thought at this stage where we are, because Google is trying to work on topics that are important to them, to the planet, and to their consumers. And finally, this is the final imminent threat to our SERPs, the threat that searcher behavior is constantly changing. This, I think, is a good thing. Search is becoming more accessible worldwide and for different abilities, but this can bring challenges and topics to bear in mind for our businesses and our organic results. The fact is, search is absolutely amazing when you know what you're looking for. But what about all those times and cases when you have no idea what something is called, which happens to me a lot of the time? And Google, in this instance, will usually display broad results and nice refinement bubbles to help get you there to the right response. But it gets also even worse when you actually can't even use text to describe what you're looking for. So two large advancements in the past few years have been Hum to Search and the incredible Google Lens. There I am trying to find the breed of my friend's adorable puppy that was like a little tiny teddy bear. The applications of Lens are manifold, from identifying plants to translating text to getting help with homework and finding the right products. In May of this year, 2022, Google reported that Lens searches take place 8 billion times a month. I wasn't sure how much that was, like if that's good or bad. When we compare that with the total amount of worldwide searches, it may not seem like a lot at around 0.3%. But if you think about it, that's growing a lot significantly since its launch. Not only this, but Google Lens is enabling the possibility of multi-search, the combination of different modes when searching, so that those of you sitting in the States can currently combine images with text to reach very specific results. For example, a dress but in green, or a specific cuisine that is close by in your neighborhood. And soon Google will even be able to incorporate audio and video into the mix too. This magic is powered by MUM, Multitask Unified Model. This is a constellation of algorithms that make up the most powerful search engine model the world has ever seen. It was announced last year at Google I/O, and it's already having a huge impact on our daily lives. It is apparently 1,000 times more powerful than BERT, and very quickly it is much more capable to... I'm running out of time. I will hurry up. No problem, I'm almost finished. And it's much more capable to identify relationships between entities. It can deliver answers from search results that are originally in other languages. But how is it a threat? Well, because the way of building results, for example, a search engine result page, are becoming much more advanced than just a textual input. So we have to consider the rise of multimodal search, or we risk losing out of really focused traffic, especially if you're in the e-commerce space. So here are some things to consider when you're optimizing images for visual search. There is a list that you can look at afterwards. And bear in mind that MUM is still young. They have huge potential, so it's going to be really exciting to see how search develops with their help. So let's wrap up. I'm so sorry for running over. I just finally want to stress that Google is not particularly evil or benevolent or any kind of specific way. Google is a company with shareholders and employees. They have competitors to beat, business goals to meet, and advancements they have to make, probably much like your own companies. They may carry out some questionable acts in order to satisfy users and their needs, but bear in mind that Google's success can very much benefit you. They reportedly send billions of visits to websites every day, and the traffic they send to the web has increased every year. There are clicks to go around. So optimize with these goals in mind. Aim to be a better resource than Google, establish organic traffic alerting systems, be open and available to pivot or adapt your strategies. There are the key takeaways, and thank you so much for listening today. Best of luck to you all.
Thank you, Izzy. That was great. So just being able to kind of dive into the space and talk about the real estate on search and how the real estate is really kind of decreasing was important. We actually have one question from the audience that I wanted to ask. Why is it so important to get with the trend of featured snippets, in your opinion?
Well, featured snippets, I think, possess so many different opportunities for us as organic marketers, whether that's in increasing our real estate on the SERPs and getting more clicks to the page if the intent is there. But I also love the brand building impact that featured snippets can have. For example, when someone is searching for a high funnel query, more of an informational intent query, for example, how old do I need to be to rent a car? Then if you're ranking for this type of query, then people associate you with this term. People associate you with this topic in general of car rental. So when they're ready to carry out the act of car rental, they might think of you as well. And it goes together really strongly when there's no transactional intent at this stage. So it's really top funnel, like what would be the things to remember when renting a car, and you can provide that resource for them. So I just think there's so many benefits around featured snippets that we can't always gain from a normal snippet or result.
Thank you, Izzy. So we just wanted to thank you for the great presentation, and we'll definitely see you on social media, helping us learn more about SEO, but also making us laugh with your memes and your GIFs.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you,
Goodbye.
Izzy.
Thank you.
Again, just a little brief pause, just a little moment. We'll catch our breath and we'll keep going. Be right back.
Mr. Johnson, Billy's Bakery.
I'm here with the owner of the most popular bakery in town, Billy Johnson. Billy, who are you wearing?
I'm wearing an apron.
The people want to know, how did you make all that dough?
Honestly, I used SEMrush to find the best keywords online, and the customers came flooding in.
We love you, Billy!
Love you too.
Hot tip, SEMrush is helping businesses skyrocket.
Your business deserves to be seen online. Step into the spotlight with SEMrush.
And we're back. So now it's time to present Erica Varanguli, Head of International Brand at SEMrush for over 2 years.
And SEMrush is one of my favorite tools. We actually use it for competitive analysis, keyword ranking, and so many other things, as I'm sure puntorojo does as well. And today she'll actually be presenting the state of search during 2022. So we welcome Erica.
Are you there, Erica? Can you hear us? Well,
waiting on Erica.
Probably, yeah. But no, SEMrush is definitely a very useful tool just to get an idea of, where you're standing, what the kind of the landscape looks like, and going back to some of the previous talks that we talked about, how is that update hitting me? Yeah, I have definitely access to Search Console and all that data, but sometimes I need some external data as well to make better decisions. So
100%. And we have Erica here now. Welcome, Erica.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Absolutely.
Yes, perfect.
Perfectly. Nice to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. So we wanted to, pass the floor to you so you can educate us on the state of search in 2022. So feel free to go ahead, Erica.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope everyone can see my screen. Please stop me, someone, if I'm just talking to myself and no one can see what I'm talking about. But as I said, hi, I'm very excited to be here. My name is Erica Varanguli. I don't expect anyone to pronounce my surname anytime soon correctly. And I'm the head of SEO of international brands here at SEMrush. You will know very soon why I was confused about that. But what this means is that I focus mainly on non-English speaking markets, and I'm organizing our activities across all those markets. I've been with SEMrush for over 2.5 years now. And before switching to this role, which is fairly recent, I was the director of organic search, hence why SEO. Which means that for the biggest part of my time at SEMrush, I've been looking into and focusing into search and Google and how things evolve over time to make hopefully strategic and correct decisions as well. So one of the things we wanted to really look into is at the end of last year, we decided
Erica, sorry to interrupt you. Can you hear me?
Yes?
I think you're presenting something over your presentation when we're sharing the screen. I'm not sure.
Is it okay now?
I'll let you know. Yeah, perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
No, thank you very much for helping here. I'm so sorry, I'm having some technology problems. So somehow this completely messed up my screen setup. Okay, we're back. So we wanted, as I say, to look into what search looked like, especially with 2020 being a very unprecedented year. We wanted to look how 2021 developed in terms of search and the state of search, and whether the recovering from the pandemic, although that might be an overstatement, I'm thinking now, also led to massive shifts or recovery in what we see in the search landscape. So as an example, just a Google Trends search for some common things like toilet paper and hand sanitizers and face masks shows to us that there was a huge spike around the time where the pandemic was in at full scale and developing around the world. However, has this now gone back to normal? Like looking at this graph, someone would say yes. But the truth may be that our habits have shifted and changed so dramatically that talking about going back to normal it doesn't mean going back to the normal as we used to define it. So that's what we wanted to explore a bit more, how people's behaviors online changed, but also how search changed. And we started with a state of the web. So we analyzed web traffic for 2021 versus 2020. So things like how many more domains or pages we have, and we're competing for rankings, or how people even engaged with content during this time. So to do that, we analyzed the whole database of 160 million keywords that we have in rankings for US-based sites, plus 7 more markets where this was applicable for the report that we put together. And what we found was actually that consistently across all the markets that we analyzed in 2021, there was there was an average of 25% actually increase in newly ranked domains year over year. But especially for the US, that was even more, that was even higher. That was 34% compared to the previous year. So we found like 33 million newly ranked domains in the SERPs. But then we decided to be a bit more sneaky, and we looked into the newly ranked URLs year over year by region as well. And there, the findings were very surprising for all of us because there was no growth there, none whatsoever. If anything, there were even minor drops. So what does this mean? Although I cannot profess to have the answers, like the definite answers to that, I feel that this meant that people felt compelled to create an online presence following the pandemic. So, they had following like second half of the year, probably in 2020, they started devising ways and launching websites or planning to launch them. But then obviously doing that within the circumstances means that you do not necessarily put all the effort or the investment that you would pre-pandemic. So maybe it meant that people created smaller sites and put less effort into creating a lot of pages like before. On another note, we analyzed our top 100,000 domains to understand what the traffic volumes look like and the trend compared over year, so 2020 to 2021. And what we actually saw that traffic increased dramatically, actually within a month from March to April, there was a 29% increase in the traffic that these domains received. But the peaks were reached between July 2020 and January 2021. Following that, in 2021, we saw slight decreases. So it looks like they were reached during the height of the pandemic as well. But then with the rollout of massive vaccination, probably, or lockdowns not being such a huge thing anymore, it went back to normal. And this is by category. So what we saw is that overall winners included travel and leisure in 2021, with the traffic growth being 20%. Maybe that's because people were finally so excited to be traveling. And the only sectors that experienced a drop were education and online education, which again